Hello, Ryan here, and welcome to Star Citizen Sunday. This is a weekly show which covers all of the news from the week just past. Be sure to subscribe if you like what you see, and let's get on with it. This week, we learn more about the Argo SRV and what to expect with engineering, as well as when to expect it. Plus, we get rumours of the next step of testing for the tech preview channel. So this week's Inside Star Citizen kicked off looking at the Argo SRV. Now this is the tow truck of space, and SRV stands for Standard Recovery Vehicle. Now following on from the rest of the Argo lineup, the SRV fits right in and supports a single player to head out into space and stay out for a small duration while helping to retrieve stranded players or derelict ships. Now you enter the SRV's interior via the elevator straight into the engineering section. This is where most of the ship's components are held, and then onto the bridge you have the usual Argo cockpit, which I do love. It is definitely a style in itself. And at the rear, you have the habitation area, which does have a bed, a suit locker, weapon and equipment rack, plus a toilet and seat and table, which they say is a place intended not just for you as the pilot, but a place for the crew of the ship that have been rescued to sit and relax while you transport them back to port. Which is actually ideal because when we get the option to lock doors and give permissions to certain players to move through various doors, you will be able to allocate to these people coming on board that they're only allowed in that area and they can't enter the bridge, so that will at least keep you somewhat protected. Now, the Argo SRV has a large tractor beam on the rear that can be controlled by the pilot via a turret view, and using this you can lock onto the ship that you want to tow and then fly that back to safety. Now, the Argo SRV will have a lot of uses going forwards. Right now they say you can use it to rescue ships that have become stranded, like if they've run out of fuel for example, or as they mention, you can actually get repaired from soft death. So as you are towed to a landing pad, the player can then use the services to repair their ship back to a flight capable state, which is a great quality of life update. I believe this is in now. I will mention this a little bit more on Star Citizen Live, but do let me know if this is actually in-game and working, or whether it is coming later on. Now, in order to use the SRV, the vehicle that's being towed needs to have their shields turned off. If you turn them on while you're being towed, it will detach you, and also you don't want to be fighting against the Argo SRV's tractor, as I suppose it would just likely break the connection. Now, as I say, the SRV's future is very bright, with the Maelstrom damage system and resource engineering network coming along. As we will hear in a couple of minutes, the SRV will have a lot of work on its hands with players calling for help and getting towed, and this will become more encouraged versus respawning and reclaiming your ship as they create more punishment to do that action. I suspect as these new planetary repair stations and scrapyards come along, they will act as places that the SRV pilots can tow ships to, and I also hope to see something like an impound style location for when players are leaving their ships in locations that can be in the way or hinder others, like in front of a garage or a hangar door, requiring players to pay a fine to retrieve them. So the Argo SRV owner gets a mission to move it out of the way because it's in violation of the location, tow it to an impound, and then the player who owns that ship has to go and pay that fine to retrieve their ship. And if they don't, then maybe they can be sold on. Now, I personally feel the SRV will be a huge moneymaker as we move more towards the resource network and physical damage system. Plus, with the planetary systems on their way, Pyro being first of course, getting stranded is going to happen a lot more. And as the reclaiming or the insurance system starts to get more fleshed out, it'll cost more, it'll take longer, and you will opt to get it repaired instead because it will be cheaper and quicker. Not to mention, if you build yourself a little scrapyard one day, having an SRV might be a helpful vehicle for finding abandoned ships and then stripping them down and selling them on. So there is a lot of potential for the SRV, mostly looking forwards into the future, and I can't wait to see what gameplay comes along for this ship, but it is definitely a personal favourite of mine. Now, the second half of Inside Star Citizen was introducing the RSI Arrastra. However, I have covered this in a dedicated video that I will link below, so be sure to check that out if you are interested. So this week's Star Citizen Live kicked off with two members of the engineering panel from CitizenCon's panel Fix It, Fly It, further talking about what we saw at CitizenCon and what's to come for the engineering gameplay. Now, the first question from Jared actually was, why are you in Manchester, as they are based in Frankfurt? And firstly, it is to do with the team restructure that is happening next year, in which they will meet many of the devs that will be coming over from the Squadron 42 teams to work with the EUPU team. Plus, they are here to attend a go, no-go meeting at the end of the week for 322, so they are here to help the team get structural salvage released for 322, as it is a very important feature. So 2 very exciting snippets of news right off the bat there. Firstly, hearing that they are doing this big restructure of the teams from Squadron coming to the PU, which we kind of knew anyway, but it is great hearing about it even more, plus working hard to get the structural salvage out for the end of the year. Anyway, to the first community question, this was, will soft death ships be repairable? So as we know, soft death is just a temporary solution to kind of simulate a ship being disabled, and will become more systemic based on various factors like components getting damaged and failing and so on and so forth. But it was also mentioned during Inside Star Citizen, as we heard, that soft death will be repairable so long as you can get your ship towed to a landing pad, where then the owner will be able to pay to get the ship repaired. Now, I haven't tested this in game yet, as on Star Citizen Live, Thorsten and his team were not thinking it was working just yet, whereas on Inside Star Citizen they were saying that you can actually do it. So if we can get a confirmation in the comments below, please do so. But as I say, I haven't tried it myself, but if this is the case, then the SRV will have a use case immediately. Now in the future, there will be actual dedicated drop-off points for the SRV to take disabled ships to fix ships that can't be repaired on site due to the damage taken, or for larger ships, for example, who have components that are too big to be removed. Now the next question is, with the engineering systems, how hard will it be for a solo player to fly a multi-crew ship the size of, say, a Cutlass and bigger? Now it will be harder, but this will be based on quite a few different factors. The age of the ship being one, so the older the ship, the more likely that something will malfunction due to wear and tear. A brand new ship will have basically no wear or tear at all, so no maintenance will necessarily be required immediately. Another factor is, if you are on your own and you get attacked, if things start breaking or going wrong, you won't be able to attend to them as quickly as you will be flying the ship. Of course, if you stick to safer areas of space and plan your trips to avoid pirate hotspots, then you should be able to keep out of trouble for the most part. But of course, if you were attacked, it will not be an easy situation to deal with alone. So avoiding combat and maintaining your ship will keep it going for longer and make it more manageable to operate solo, requiring less hands-on. Next question is, are minigames planned to fix things, or will it just be magic beams? Now they say there are plans for more bespoke repair mechanics, but this will not be part of the initial release. It will just be a simple solution first, like a beam, and they will see how that is perceived by the community and then decide whether or not things need to be more complex or have bespoke interactions per item. They don't want to overcomplicate things and have it require a handbook basically to learn how to do things, and there will already be a lot of complexity with managing our systems, our ship, like life support, atmospheres, fires, relay nodes, and a lot more. Now, personally speaking, as someone who does love simulation games, and I do personally prefer things to be a little bit more slightly towards the simulation side than the arcade side, I really love the idea of having to learn these systems. I get that they don't want it to be so complicated on top of everything else that Star Citizen offers, as it is a complex game, but engineering is something that ultimately everyone will at some point have to engage with, as we all own ships. But I certainly want the depth, and I know I'm not alone in this thought, as there are players I know who just want to play as an engineer and live out their sort of Star Trek Scotty fantasy. So I do hope they can find that middle ground that will allow for the engineering system to be kind of easy to get into at the basic level, but have enough depth and interactions to make it rewarding and engaging for those who want to spend the time to learn it, especially as this has always been Star Citizen's approach. So fingers crossed they can find a good balance here, as I know I am not the only Star Citizen fan, and we all have our preferences on what we want from this game. Now the next question is, will we see any subcomponents? Have these been replaced by relays? Now, relays are a part of the subcomponent gameplay, as well as the scrubbers for life support, and maybe some components like the CPU or avionics systems will have subcomponents as well. And this does kind of hark back to the previous question a little bit, that they don't want to have complex gameplay for the sake of having complex gameplay. They want their gameplay to be meaningful. Now, subcomponents, they say, are on their long-term plan, but won't be part of the initial release. So it does sound like they will be thinking deeper about subcomponents for the future, which, if you didn't know, subcomponents are intended to be somewhat small additional items that can be placed inside a main component, and this will alter the stats, like providing a buff here and there, maybe better efficiency, reduced power draw, that kind of thing. But it'll be interesting to see what they come up with, but again, hopefully they can find that middle ground. Now, the next question is, are there plans for additional relays for coolant, data, or fuel? And they say that the plan is to have all of these same resources travel through the same relays rather than having extra separate relays for each of them. Next question, will each manufacturer see different problems, different issues, and have different capabilities when it comes to engineering, or will they all be the same? Now, this will actually be on a per ship difference basis, as each ship will have somewhat a different layout of the resource network. Of course, variants will be similar, but still different because they have different internals. There will also be differences between military ships versus civilian, with military ships, for example, having more relays, plus there will be differences between manufacturers as well, and ship item manufacturers too. For example, a better quality component will actually malfunction less than a standard quality component, irrespective of what ship it's placed in. So investing in better components will actually be important. The component classes and grades will also add more depth and choice to how they will perform. For example, a competition component will wear out much faster than, say, an industrial or military grade component. And when it comes to the damage system, so the Maelstrom system, all ships will have varying levels of armor, and the materials that each manufacturer use for their ships will be different, impacting their strengths and abilities. And of course, this will all vary per ship and per role. A racing ship does not need to have heavy armor or heavy body materials weighing it down, whereas a military fighter wants that protection. And this will all tie into the economy as well, and that supply and demand of all materials, from their raw resource gathering to the processing and refining to the transportation, the repair and the maintenance and the sale of that material. It all goes hand in hand, and it's a pretty exciting, encompassing, wholesome system. Now anyway, the next question is, will there be any kind of danger to the engineer, like components exploding? And yes, if something overheats, it could cause a power surge, which could then cause a fire, and obviously you can get set on fire. So you can make things worse, but they certainly don't want you to be insta-killed because you pressed the wrong button. Now, as they get more of these systems in, a sudden explosion or a catastrophic explosion with your ship just blowing up will be very uncommon, and instead systems will fail and components will die, and then you will just become basically dead in the water, rather than just exploding. Now that said, if a quantum drive does explode, then yes, a catastrophic explosion can happen, so it is still possible, but it will obviously be far less common than it is now. It also means things like sabotage is an option, which is definitely part of the intention, getting on board of a ship or into a location and then causing a component to malfunction to then cause other issues down the line, or distract people, or create cascading issues. This is all intended gameplay, and systems like the resource network allow it to happen. And somewhat related, but for salvaging instead, they will have other resources running through the ship, like fuel and flammable gases and other liquids and all these different things that need to be extracted or filtered out before you start chomping away. Otherwise, you can cause some pretty dramatic explosions that may see you blowing yourself up while you're salvaging a ship. So getting this resource network in will hopefully allow them to expand on the salvaging mechanic beyond just munching or structural salvage, and get these hazardous materials in the game as well, so that we have to be a little bit more careful. Now the next question is, will opening doors automatically cycle airlocks to minimize wasted oxygen? And no, airlocks will work as you would expect them, but if you open a cargo bay door while you are in space, then your oxygen or your atmosphere will be sucked out. So you will have to think about this before you're just wandering around the ship, opening doors and hatches and stuff. Pay attention to where you are. Next question is, will we need to memorize ship layouts, or will we have the ability to have scans reveal the important component locations for the ship to then target them? So it is kind of both. Scanning a ship may reveal the vulnerable areas, and the new targeting system will allow for subcomponent targeting as well, but it will certainly be beneficial and superior for players to know where to target ships instead of having to spend time scanning. The same kind of goes for the pilot as well. Knowing your ship's weak points and flying to avoid exposing these locations to your opponent will be very important. Plus again, sabotaging, salvaging, knowing where to go immediately to get the more lucrative materials on a ship or components out of a ship when you're salvaging a ship, or where a component may be that will allow you to effectively sabotage it. So having that knowledge of each ship will certainly be superior and beneficial when it comes to all aspects of the game, and learning that will be quite important. Now the next question is, how will the pilot be notified that a component needs attention on a single crewed ship? Now this will be done via the new MFDs, highlighting issues on your self-status screen, plus there will be messages on the UI to inform you of errors and issues. Next question is the life support system also tied to a fuse that can break so that you may lose access to controlling a room's atmosphere remotely and be forced to deal with a fire, for example, in person? And they say yes, each room has a vent that is connected to its own relay. So you could lose connection to one room rather than the entire ship, whereas if the life support system goes down, then all rooms lose that function. Now each vent for each room controls the composition of the room and the temperature, and you will need to fix the relay if you do lose control. And the air for each room is still an open discussion, but right now they are thinking that they have tanks that store the atmosphere from each room. So for example, if you vent an atmosphere from a room, it does not get thrown into space and lost, as it is a pretty precious resource, especially if you are out in space. So instead it gets stored, allowing you to then put that back into the room when you need it. So if there is a fire, you can suck out the oxygen, suck out the atmosphere, store it away, wait till the fire has gone out, deal with whatever caused the fire, and then vent that atmosphere back into the room again. And the atmosphere can actually get restored if you were to just fly in the atmosphere of a planet and then open the doors, which is pretty cool. They also have the idea of maybe having auxiliary atmosphere sticks that you can use to refill the room, so managing your atmosphere will be quite important, and again, somewhat complex. So the next question is, how often during general gameplay will a component malfunction or a fire break out? And they say for fresh ships, it's very unlikely. The more wear, tear and age a ship has, the more chance something will happen. But they want to ensure that it is not really annoying for players, and as they get this system out into our hands, they will obviously begin to balance it and do a lot of that balancing based on our feedback. Now, as I've said, there are many variables to this question. Item reliability, what you do as a player, how you fly, whether you push the ship to its limits every time, whether you're maintaining it, the environment you're flying through will affect it, and how you have set up your resources. For example, running at 20% efficiency instead of 100%, so basically underpowering your ship will reduce the amount of wear it takes. There is a lot of ways the malfunctions can happen, and just as many methods to prevent it. And now for the final question. Jared did say 2024 is the year to reap the rewards of focusing much time on getting features built and polished in Squadron 42 first, before rolling them out to the persistent universe. So the question being, when will we be seeing the resource network system come to the persistent universe? And they say the first iteration they are hoping to get in for the Q2 patch next year, with the release of life support, fire, and the base engineering gameplay, being the repair beam and item functionality. Basically everything that we saw in the CitizenCon demo. So Q2 is, I think, the end of June, which is great to hear that they are aiming to get this out at that point, and I look forward to seeing it come along and getting my hands on it and just seeing how bad I am at it. But we will hear more about the rollout plan up next. Now, the second part of Star Citizen Live was a special guest called Geoff Zanelli, who is the music composer for Squadron 42 specifically, And we heard a lot of his work during the I Held the Line Squadron 42 video that we saw during CitizenCon. But this section of Star Citizen Live was just a general casual chat with Geoff about him, his life, his line of work, rather than any details about the game. So also this week, the Intergalactic Aerospace Expo continues on, with manufacturers like Drake, Argo, Consolidated Outland, Greycat, Kruger and Anvil all entering the halls. We also had a Q&A for the Argo SRV, answering questions we may have had, as well as a sale for the Flight Ready SRV and concept sale for the RSI Arrastra. Now, in regards to the separation of the replication layer test that happened a few days ago, although we have not heard officially from Cloud Imperium about how it went, I was sent a link to a Reddit post that stated, after the preliminary testing of the replication layer split, the intention now is to test the connection of Stanton and Pyro via the jump gate before the end of December on the Tech Preview channel. Now, this post also mentions that it's unclear whether server meshing would be needed for this test, and it says that while logic suggests that static server meshing would be required for any sort of jump gate, the tech was not mentioned in the plans. But successful deployment of both the replication layer split and jump gates to the Tech Preview channel would pave the way for a Pyro release, as well as both static and dynamic server meshing next year. Now, of course, as this isn't officially from Cloud Imperium, and I don't know who provided this information, take this with a pinch of salt, as, of course, I suspected the 4.0 patch being Pyro and static server meshing would come next year. I think that's the most likely case anyway, but hearing it say that the plan to release both static and dynamic server meshing next year feels less likely. But that is only based on what I have been told, as I don't understand this technology to give more of a solid opinion than that. But let us hope that this is the case, as that would be pretty astonishing to get both static and dynamic done by next year, which means the foundation should be complete, and then it's just building the game. Now, this Reddit post also said that it is top priority to bring Squadron 42 features to the persistent universe, with tremendous progress already being made, and they want to continue boosting the progress for the rest of the year and beyond. And work will continue into the new year until they have implemented everything from Squadron 42, with the goal of the Q1 patch to contain as many Squadron 42 features as possible. Now again, this would be pretty incredible, as there was so much shown in many areas of the game that the Squadron 42 work would improve. So I do look forward to hearing more about the 322 patch for the end of the year and seeing what that will bring, as well as getting the Squadron 42 work into the persistent universe for Q1, and then the resource network, fires and life support systems for Q2. Now, of course, any of these suspected dates could slip. Again, this isn't all official word, but what is certain to me is that 2024 is going to be a pretty monumental year for Star Citizen's development and Squadron 42, and here is hoping it all goes as smoothly as possible. So that brings us to the end of the show. If you do enjoy my content, please consider subscribing and hitting that like button. Also, I am able to do this thanks to my very generous patrons and channel members. If you appreciate what I do and would like to help make it even better from as little as $1 a month, all of the links are provided below.